Picture the world's greatest concept album. You're probably thinking it's Pink Floyd's The Wall, right? And if not that, it's gotta be the Beatles' Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. And if not that, it's gotta be The Who's Tommy or Quadrophenia, right? Well, what if I told you the world's greatest concept album was actually written 130 years before those albums? And what if I told you it wasn't exactly an album per se, but a series of operas or music dramas written by one eccentric madman? I'm talking, of course, about Richard Wagner's Der Ring des Nibelungen, or The Ring of the Nibelung. There is no way I can give a fully fleshed out account of The Ring in one sitting. My hope with this video is that I'll give you enough of an overview to get you interested in listening for yourself. It all began in 1848. A young Richard Wagner was simply minding his business when all of a sudden he became a court conductor for the royalty of Dresden, joined up with radical young socialist rebels during the 1849 uprising, subsequently fled to Zurich, Switzerland when a warrant was issued for his arrest for revolutionary activity, while in exile in Zurich, ruined his marriage by beginning a doomed affair with Mathilde Wesendonck, the wife of Otto Wesendonck, his patron, then fled from both his failed marriage and affair to Venice, Italy, before finally returning to Germany and being granted clemency. Definitely a guy you want to have a drink with. Wagner was able to channel his pain, lust, love, and anger from this period into The Ring, which gave it an emotional heft that other works of the time simply did not have. He broke new ground musically as well, diverging further away from the formulas he established on his romantic operas such as Tannhäuser and Lohengrin. With that exposition out of the way, no pun intended, let's get into the first work of The Ring, Das Rheingold. Das Rheingold opens with this epic overture. Take a listen to the opening. Just a simple low drone played among the basses, with bassoons doubling and adding new material on top in combination with the brass. Slowly, a static E-flat major chord is introduced as the opening motif of the work. Interestingly, if you analyze the low drone of the overture, it's not too dissimilar from a sine wave bass. From this point, the overture continues to pulse and swell, adding and subtracting new instruments and textures, as well as exploring the deep peaks and valleys of loudness. Ultimately, the overture leads into the first chorus of the work, Wia Wega, a sort of nonsensical term Wagner invented for the Rhine maidens to sing. Das Rheingold functions, ultimately, according to Wagner himself, as a sort of prelude to the greater work of The Ring, in the tradition of the old Greek tragedies, one comedy followed by three tragedies. As Das Rheingold is the first work of The Ring, many of Wagner's new ideas on form and texture are introduced here for the first time. Leitmotifs, which are small musical phrases that represent people, places, things, and ideas, also make their first appearance here. There are leitmotifs indicating the presence of the gods, the Nibelung, the Rhine maidens, and Wotan's spear. By using leitmotifs to structure his works and doing away with the traditional aria, chorus, and recitative, Wagner was able to create a sort of continuous melody that was able to pulse and undulate with the story of the libretto in ways traditional opera simply could not. Das Rheingold is the shortest opera in the Ring cycle, and in my opinion, probably the most tame. The music here is milder by comparison, and more tonally based than the later works. However, I have to say personally, I learned quite a bit about how to orchestrate soft, lush figures that flow seamlessly into one another from Das Rheingold. In addition, the orchestra here is of a much more similar size to Wagner's earlier works such as Lohengrin or Tannhäuser. But where he does double or expand the orchestra, the effects are felt quite substantially. Let's take a listen again to the transition music from Valhalla to the underworld of the Nibelung, and note this solo anvil passage, quite innovative for its time. The next opera in the Ring cycle, Die Walküre, is where things truly come into focus. Both the music and the plot take a much darker turn than the preceding Das Rheingold. Musically, the ambiguous semi-major tonality of Das Rheingold is abandoned for a gothic minor and fully diminished sound. Plot-wise, things also take a darker turn, with incest turning into violence, betrayal, and ultimately death. The opening overture of Die Walküre is stunningly dense, and clearly the earliest forerunner to heavy metal like Black Sabbath. Just take a listen. Many new themes are introduced, and old ones return, transformed harmonically, rhythmically, and dynamically. In Die Walküre, Wagner truly showed how an 8, 4, or even 2-bar piece of music could provide almost limitless material through transformation. And of course, I would be remiss if I didn't mention the notorious Ride of the Valkyries, which opens Act 3 of this opera. Now, I'm sure many of you have heard this in an instrumental form in movies like Apocalypse Now, or Watchmen, or various TV commercials, but I think the full impact you get from hearing it with the chorus of the Valkyries against the orchestra is incredible. Take a listen to this. The bombast of the Ride provided inspiration to numerous musicians, including Richard Strauss, Gustav Mahler, and modern musicians such as Meat Loaf and Phil Spector. The popularity of Ride is no contemporary occurrence. There were numerous requests in Wagner's day to arrange the piece as a standalone concert overture. Overall, Die Walküre is a dark, heavy masterpiece that presaged genres in both the classical and contemporary canon. It's also the most popular of the Ring cycle and the most frequently performed as a standalone opera. I think any musician, classical and especially metal musicians, will find a lot to learn from this opera. It slaps. The penultimate opera in the Ring cycle is entitled Siegfried. Now, it's important to note, from the time of completion of Die Walküre to the time of completion to Siegfried, Wagner composed 2 operas that were independent works entitled Tristan und Isolde, which I'll make a video about on its own later, and Die Meistersinger von Nuremberg. Both of these operas were very important to Wagner, but especially Tristan, with its extended chromaticism, overdramatic orchestration, and the influence of Arthur Schopenhauer, ensured that Siegfried and the final opera, Götterdämmreuung, would be very different beasts than the first 2, Walküre and Rheingold. A prime example of this is the way Wagner changed his endless melody concept. Things became far more chromatic in Siegfried than in Walküre. Take a listen to this excerpt from the opening of Siegfried. In the story, Siegfried returns from hunting in the woods back to the home that he shares with his guardian, Mime, the Nibelung. Just take a listen to the tension of the interplay created by, on one hand, Siegfried's horn call leitmotif played here on the violins, versus the low drone created by the basses, celli, and brass. This figure from the opening act is one of just many examples throughout Siegfried where Wagner utilized tension and chromaticism to advance the story. Another notable excerpt takes place in Act 2. Popularly, it's known as the Waldweben, or Forest Murmurs excerpt. In the story, Siegfried is alone pondering who his true father might be. Just listen here how Wagner uses various wind instruments to evoke the sound of birdsong while he simultaneously lays down a gorgeous figure in the strings to evoke the forest floor. Overall, one can say Siegfried introduced an advanced chromaticism into the ring cycle that had not previously existed in Das Rheingold or Die Walküre, but it paled in comparison to what came next. Götterdämmreuung, or Twilight of the Gods, is the final opera in the ring cycle, and in many ways it is the place where it all comes together. It is the longest opera in the ring cycle and contains a full prologue act before Act 1 even begins. The tense moments of chromaticism in Siegfried are heightened and expanded here. Leitmotifs are stretched to their full limit to accommodate the ever-escalating story. Wagner also took the step to compose a few standalone orchestral pieces, something he had not sought fit to do in the preceding three operas. The first standalone piece is entitled Siegfried's Rhine Journey. It is a musical recap of Siegfried's story throughout the Ring. In it, Wagner brilliantly brings back various leitmotifs stretching all the way back to Das Rheingold and mashes them together in a way you might say presages remixes. The second standalone concert piece is entitled Siegfried's Funeral March. It takes place at the end of the opera after Siegfried has been betrayed and stabbed in the back by Wagner. It is a masterclass in orchestration. Just listen how it starts with this lone sad figure played in cellos and basses. It then builds upon this sinister theme of betrayal and death until an explosion of strings and brass illustrate the literal stab in the back. As Götterdämmreuung finally ends, and Valhalla burns and falls from the sky, a crescendo of percussion, strings, brass, and winds play all at once and bring Wagner's epic ring cycle to its conclusion. And that is the music of Wagner's Der Ring des Nibelungen. Now, obviously, one 10-minute YouTube video is not nearly enough to cover everything that goes on in the ring, both story-wise and musically, and I'll probably make a separate video covering just the story of the ring. But I wanted to make this video because I think that Wagner's Ring is a truly contemporary work. And I think a lot of the problem is a lot of contemporary and contemporary classical musicians view a lot of this stuff as like in a museum or sort of not relevant to what's going on musically. But to me, The Ring has always been one of the most important pieces of music I've heard in my life. It's influenced me theoretically, philosophically, aesthetically, and I think it can do the same for anybody who gives it a chance. Yes, it is long, yes, it is arduous, yes, it is in German, but Wagner to me is a contemporary artist, and I hope that after watching this video, you'll go check out The Ring and see what I mean, because I think it has a lot to offer any genre of music, any kind of musician, whether you read music, don't read music, whether you're a composer who works with big ensembles like orchestras, or just writes for string quartet, or if you're a pop singer, or a hip-hop producer, or whoever. To me, The Ring is universal and it's contemporary, and a lot of music, I think, that is thought of as old is actually not old. It's just as vital as anything we hear today. It's just the way that it's presented to us. So to me, I'm making this video, and I'll probably make other videos like this to show people this isn't old sort of music sitting in a museum somewhere. It's vital, it's alive, it's rebellious, and it's super inspiring. So go check out Wagner's The Ring. You won't regret it. And till next time.